Good evening, dear learner, and welcome again. If you enjoy powerful life stories that help you grow in English, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a lesson. Today's story is called The Way to Comparison. Watch until the end to see how one young man's struggle transforms into a victory of self-discovery. Now, let me ask you, have you ever looked at someone else's life and felt smaller, weaker, or less worthy? This is a pain of comparison, and it is one of the deepest wounds of the human heart. Part 1, The Mirror of Envy. In the busy city of Lyon, there lived a young man named Daniel. He was 25, tall but slightly bent, as if carrying an invisible burden on his shoulders. From the outside, his life seemed ordinary. He had a stable job at a small advertising agency, a group of friends who often invited him out, and a modest apartment that overlooked the river. Yet inside, Daniel was restless. Every morning began the same way. He would open his phone and scroll through social media. There, faces of old classmates filled his screen. Smiling couples traveling the world, colleagues announcing promotions, friends buying houses or showing off brand new cars. Each post struck Daniel like a sharp stone. His mind whispered, "Look at them. Look at you. You are behind." At work, the feeling grew heavier. His colleague, Julian, the same age as Daniel, had already been promoted to project leader. Whenever the team gathered around Julian's desk, praising his ideas, Daniel forced a smile, but inside, jealousy burned like fire. He often caught himself thinking, if only I were like him, smarter, more confident, more successful. Even in his free time, comparison followed him like a shadow. When he went jogging by the river, he compared his body to others who ran faster, their movements light and strong. When he met his childhood friend Clara, who was studying for her master's degree abroad, he compared his own path and found it lacking. One night, Daniel stood before the mirror in his dimly lit apartment. His reflection stared back, eyes tired, shoulders slumped. He whispered, "Why am I not enough?" The silence of the room was cruel. It gave no answer, only the echo of his doubts. That same evening, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his younger brother, Samuel. Got the scholarship, moving to Canada in September. Daniel stared at the screen, numb. His younger brother was flying higher, while he felt trapped in mud. He congratulated him, but inside he sank deeper into despair. He began to avoid friends, answering fewer calls, pretending to be busy. The truth was, he couldn't stand hearing about other people's victories anymore. Their success felt like his failure. Their light made his own life appear darker. But pain has a way of preparing us for transformation. One Friday, as Daniel sat in a cafe, lost in thought, he overheard two strangers at the next table. One said, "Comparison is the thief of joy. If you run someone else's race, you will never win your own." The words pierced Daniel's heart. For the first time, he wondered, was the real problem of his life, or the way he was looking at it? That single question would change everything. Though Daniel did not know it yet, he was standing at the doorway of a new journey, a journey that would lead him to freedom, but only after many struggles, temptations, and painful lessons. Learning focus. Notice the phrase comparison followed him like a shadow. The simile shows how constant and heavy the feeling was. The idiom, the thief of joy, means comparison steals happiness. In grammar, past continuous, he was standing, he was scrolling, shows ongoing habits, while past simple, he whispered, he stared, marks sharp moments of realization. Reflection questions. What made Daniel feel behind in life? How did comparison affect his relationships with others? What powerful words did he overhear at the cafe? Try retelling in your own words a moment when Daniel looked into the mirror and asked, "Why am I not enough?" Part 2, The Breaking Point. The words he'd overheard in the cafe, "Comparison is the thief of joy," kept echoing in Daniel's mind. Yet instead of freeing him, they haunted him, because when he returned home that night, he opened his phone again, scrolling through the endless parade of lives brighter than his. He knew comparison was poison, but he could not stop drinking it. Weeks passed, and Daniel grew heavier inside. His work began to suffer. Reports delayed, designs unfinished, meetings missed. Julian, his promoted colleague, now looked at him with pity instead of rivalry. That pity burned Daniel worse than envy. Then came the moment that shattered him. One Monday morning, his manager called him into the office. The blinds were half drawn, the light slicing the room into sharp lines. His manager's voice was calm but heavy. "Daniel, you have talent. But talent means nothing if you waste it. Deadlines missed, energy low. If this continues, we cannot keep you here." The words struck like a hammer. His job, the one steady thing he had, was slipping through his hands. Daniel left the office with his ears ringing, his chest tight. He walked through the city streets, yet everything felt far away, as if the world was moving but he was frozen. That evening, his phone buzzed again. It was Clara, his childhood friend. She sent a photo of her graduation ceremony, dressed in a gown, smiling with her family. Underneath the caption, "Finally made it." Daniel's hand trembled as he looked at the photo. He didn't reply. Instead, he placed the phone face down on the table and stared at the empty wall. His heart whispered cruelly, "Look at her! Look at your brother! Look at everyone! You are the only one standing still." His apartment reflected his inner state. Dirty dishes piled in the sink, laundry thrown across chairs, old food rotting in the fridge. A storm outside, a storm inside. That night, he stood again before the mirror. His face was pale, his eyes ringed with dark shadows. He whispered, "When did I lose myself?" For a moment, he imagined smashing the mirror, breaking the image of the man who was never enough. But he didn't. Instead, he sank onto the floor, head in his hands. Hours passed in silence. Then, close to midnight, a memory rose from deep inside him. His grandfather's voice. Years ago, when Daniel was a boy, his grandfather had said, "The day you compare your seed to another man's tree, you will never grow. Plant your seed, water it, trust your season." The memory was like a small light in his darkness. Could it be true? Was his life not broken, but simply unfolding at a different rhythm? Daniel lifted his head. Tears blurred his vision, but something stirred in him. A question, soft but powerful. What if I stopped comparing? What if I learned to walk my own path? He didn't know how. He didn't know where to begin. But for the first time in months, he felt the faintest spark of possibility. And so, without realizing it, Daniel had reached his breaking point. Not the end, but the place where change begins. Learning focus. Notice the metaphor, a storm outside, a storm inside, which shows how Daniel's messy apartment reflected his messy thoughts. The idiom, slipping through his hands, means losing something important. His grandfather's line, "Plant your seed, trust your season," is a proverb-like metaphor teaching patience and individuality. Reflection questions. What warning did Daniel's manager give him? How did Clara's success affect him? What lesson did his grandfather's words carry? Try retelling the moment when Daniel remembered his grandfather's advice in your own words. Part 3, the first step. The night of his breaking point left Daniel drained but strangely lighter, as if admitting his despair had emptied a heavy jar inside him. He woke the next morning before the alarm rang, sunlight barely brushing through his curtains. For the first time in weeks, he didn't reach for his phone. He simply sat on the edge of his bed, breathing. The urge was strong. His phone glowed beside him, whispering with unseen voices. "Look, compare, fall again." But Daniel whispered back, "Not today." That tiny refusal felt like his first victory. He rose, showered, and cleaned the kitchen sink. The sound of dishes clinking was like drums of defiance. He folded his clothes, threw away the spoiled food, and opened his window to let the air in. His apartment no longer looked like a palace, but neither did it look like a grave. At work, he arrived 10 minutes early. His colleagues exchanged surprised glances. Even Julian raised an eyebrow. Daniel said nothing. He simply opened his laptop and began to work on a campaign draft he had avoided for days. The words came slowly, awkwardly, as if his mind resisted this new discipline. But he kept going. By noon, he had finished half the project. Not perfect, but alive. For the first time in months, pride flickered inside him. Not pride compared to others, but pride in himself. That evening, temptation came knocking again. His friends messaged him, "Drinks tonight, you coming?" The thought of laughter, music, and escape was sweet. His thumb hovered over the keyboard, ready to type yes. But he remembered his grandfather's words, "Trust your season." If he went, tomorrow would crumble again. If he stayed, maybe he could build something. He placed the phone face down, opened his laptop, and continued his work. The hours dragged slowly, like heavy chains. Yet when midnight struck, the campaign draft was complete. Exhausted, Daniel leaned back in his chair. For the first time in years, he whispered into the quiet, "One day at a time. I can win." He knew the war wasn't over. He knew comparison would return, stronger, louder. But tonight, he had taken his first step. And that step, though small, was enough to shift the tide. Learning focus. Notice how the phrase, "hours drag like heavy chains," describes the difficulty of resisting distraction. The contrast, not perfect, but alive, highlights the importance of progress over perfection. The idiom "shift the tide" means to slowly change the direction of events. Reflection questions. What small actions did Daniel take to change his morning? Why did he refuse to go out with his friends? What promise did he whisper to himself at midnight? Try retelling the moment when Daniel said, "Not today," to his phone in your own words. Part 4, the relapse. For 3 days, Daniel held his ground. He woke before the alarm, cleaned his apartment, worked with focus, and even cooked simple meals instead of eating junk food. His colleagues noticed the difference. Clara texted him, "You seem brighter these days." Even Julian, usually distant, gave him a nod of respect during a meeting. But discipline, Daniel discovered, is like a newborn flame. It shines, yet trembles at the slightest wind. On the 4th evening, exhaustion struck. The day had been heavy. Endless emails, sharp criticism from a client, the pressure of deadlines squeezing his chest. By the time Daniel arrived home, his body begged for comfort. He dropped onto the couch, telling himself, just 10 minutes of rest. But 10 minutes stretched into an hour slipped into 3. Midnight passed, and the campaign report due the next morning remained untouched. The couch cradled him not like a friend, but like an enemy in disguise. The next day, he overslept, his shirt wrinkled, his hair messy, his eyes burning from too little rest. At the office, his manager's look of disappointment cut deeper than words. Julian avoided eye contact, and Clara didn't reply to his messages all day. Daniel sat at his desk, shame crawling across his skin. The voices returned, cruel and familiar. "See? You can't change. You'll always be the same. Why even fight it?" For a moment, he believed them. He saw his future collapsing, job lost, friendships fading, himself sinking again into the swamp of excuses. Panic gripped his chest, a storm raging inside him. But in that storm, another memory rose. His grandfather's voice, steady and clear. "The question is not whether you fall, but whether you rise again." Daniel clenched his fists onto the desk. He realized relapse was not the end. It was a test. The battle was not lost unless he refused to fight again. That night, instead of running into the arms of sleep, Daniel sat at his desk. His hands trembled as he opened his laptop. He whispered like a soldier returning to the battlefield. Not tomorrow, now. Line by line, word by word, he fought his way back. The report was late, imperfect, but finished. And in finishing, he discovered something vital. Failure was not falling down. It was staying down. Learning focus. Notice the metaphor, discipline is like a newborn flame, fragile, easily blown out. The simile, the couch cradled him like an enemy in disguise, shows how comfort can betray us. The idiom, a storm raging inside him, captures emotional chaos. Reflection questions. What mistake caused Daniel's relapse? How did this affect his work and relationships? What did he whisper to himself when he chose to fight back? Part 5. The strategy of small wins. The relapse shook Daniel deeply. For days, he carried the weight of shame like a stone in his chest. But instead of destroying him, it opened his eyes. He realized change could not come through sudden bursts of energy followed by collapse. He needed something steadier, something stronger than mood or impulse. That weekend, Daniel visited his grandfather's old countryside home. The house was small, surrounded by a garden where the old man once grew tomatoes and roses. Though his grandfather had passed away years ago, Daniel still felt his presence there. As he sat under the shade of the walnut tree, the memory of his grandfather's words returned. "Plant your seed, water it, trust your season." Daniel whispered, "But how do I water it, grandfather? How do I keep growing when I am so weak?" As if an answer, he remembered another line his grandfather often said, "Big doors swing on small hinges." That phrase struck him like a hammer, shaping iron. Small things move great things. Maybe the secret was not in grand changes, but in tiny, repeated victories. When he returned to the city, Daniel created a simple rule for himself. 5 minutes. No matter how tired, no matter how late, he had to work at least 5 minutes on his most important task each evening. The first night, he set a timer. His eyes were heavy. His body begged for rest. Every second dragged like wet sand. But when the timer rang, something surprising happened. He didn't stop. The momentum carried him. 5 minutes became 20. 20 became an hour. By the time he closed his laptop, his campaign was halfway finished. The next morning, he woke with a strange sense of victory. Not grand, but steady. A small win, yet powerful enough to shift the tide inside him. Day after day, Daniel repeated the ritual. Some nights, he managed only the 5 minutes. Other nights, he worked for hours. But the power was not in the length. It was in the rhythm. He was training his mind to obey, instead of obeying his laziness. His colleagues began to notice. Julian, once distant, commented in a meeting, "Good progress, Daniel." His manager's eyes softened. Clara, after weeks of silence, wrote to him, "Proud of you. You're different these days." For the first time, Daniel felt the ground beneath him was steady. His life was no longer a cycle of bursts and collapses, but a rhythm of small wins stacking into strength. And in the quiet of his apartment, he whispered to himself, "This is how I plant my seed, one small victory at a time." Learning focus. The proverb, "Big doors swing on small hinges," teaches that great results come from small, consistent actions. The idiom, "shift the tide," shows how his direction of life slowly changed. Notice how past and tenuous, seconds dragging. He was training his mind, shows ongoing struggle, while past simple. He said he worked, he finished, marks decisive steps of victory. Reflection questions. What new rule did Daniel create for himself? How did the 5-minute method help him? What changes did others begin to notice? Part 6. The Temptation of Escape. Weeks passed, and Daniel's life slowly reshaped itself. His 5-minute rule became a rhythm. His apartment was tidier, his work sharper, and his spirit steadier. For the first time in years, he felt he was no longer sinking, but climbing. But stability, like sunshine, often invites shadows. Temptation waits for the moment you think you are safe. One Friday evening, after a long week, Daniel's colleagues invited him out. "Come on, Daniel," they urged. "You've earned it. Let's celebrate." At first, he resisted. He planned to go home, work his 5 minutes, and rest. But the thought of laughter, music, and escape was sweet. He told himself, "Just a drink or two. I deserve this." The bar was loud with music, glasses clinking like careless promises. Daniel sipped water at first, reminding himself to stay disciplined. But then, someone handed him a glass of whiskey. One won't hurt, he thought. One became two. Two became four. By midnight, the city spun around him as he stumbled into the night. His phone buzzed. It was Clara. "Are you coming over?" she asked. But Daniel couldn't face her in that state. He ignored the message, sinking deeper into the haze. The next morning, he woke with a pounding head. His laptop sat unopened on the desk. A deadline glared at him from the calendar like a cruel judge. The rhythm he had built was broken. Shame hit him harder than the hangover. He remembered his grandfather's warning. The day you compare your seed to another man's tree, you will never grow. And now, here he was, dragged down by the oldest chains. Pleasure, escape, the false promise of comfort. For a moment, despair whispered, "You've lost it all. You're back at the beginning." But then another thought cut through. No, one mistake is not the whole story. With trembling hands, he brewed coffee, sat at his desk, and opened his laptop. His vision blurred, his body protested, but he forced himself to type. Line by line, word by word, the report came alive. Slow, clumsy, imperfect, but done. That night, he texted Clara, "I slipped, but I'm fighting again." Her reply came quickly. "That's all I need to hear." And in that moment, Daniel realized a truth that would stay with him forever. Falling is not failure. Failure is refusing to rise. Learning focus. The idiom, glass is clinking like careless promises, shows how temptation often hides in moments of fun. The phrase, falling is not failure. Failure is refusing to rise, teaches resilience. Notice the past continuous. Music was swirling, his vision was blurring. To describe his state, while past simple, he typed, he finished, marks decisive recovery. Reflection questions. What temptation caused Daniel to stumble again? How did he feel the next morning? What truth did he discover about real failure? Part 7. The Crossroads. After the night of temptation, Daniel returned to his 5-minute rule with fresh determination. Day by day, he rebuilt his rhythm. His reports improved. His apartment remained in order, and Clara began to trust him again. Even Julian, once a silent rival, started treating him like an equal. But deep inside, Daniel knew his greatest test had not yet come, and it arrived sooner than he expected. On a stormy Thursday afternoon, his manager called him into the office. Rain slid down the window, streaks of silver against the glass. The air was tense. His manager's voice was calm but sharp. "Daniel, the company is launching a new campaign. It's big, high profile. If it succeeds, it could open doors for everyone involved. If it fails," he paused, letting the weight of the silence press against Daniel's chest, "there will be no second chances. I want you to lead the team." Daniel froze. This was the opportunity he had secretly dreamed of, but it also terrified him. Leading a team meant responsibility, not just for himself, but for others. It meant no excuses, no hiding, no collapse. That night, he stood at his apartment window, watching the rain blur the city lights. Clara sat on the couch, her book resting on her lap. She looked at him gently and said, "You're afraid." Daniel nodded. "What if I fail again? What if I ruin everything?" Clara rose, placed her hand on his shoulder, and whispered words that lit a fire in his chest. "Control doesn't mean you never fall. It means you rise faster than you fall." The next morning, Daniel walked into the office with new resolve. He gathered his team, outlined a vision, and broke the massive project into small, clear steps. Just as he had learned with his 5-minute rule, he taught the team to focus on little victories. Step by step, brick by brick. At first, doubt gnawed at him. Could he really guide others when he had struggled so much with himself? But as days turned into weeks, the team began to trust his leadership. Every evening, they met to review progress. And slowly, what had looked like an impossible mountain began to shrink. Yet temptation still lurked in shadows. Some nights, when Daniel was exhausted, the old voices whispered, "Skip tonight. Take it easy." But now he had Clara's words as a shield. "Rise faster than you fall." As the deadline loomed closer, Daniel stood at the edge of choice. Behind him lay comfort, excuses, and the old life of envy. Ahead of him lay discipline, courage, and a new path. And this time, he chose forward. Learning focus. Notice Clara's line. Control doesn't mean you never fall. It means you rise faster than you fall. This is a powerful truth expressed simply. The idiom make or break means something that could lead to either great success or total failure. Grammar blends past simple. He gathered, he outlined, he chose. With past continuous, doubt was gnawing. Temptations were whispering. To show his struggle and his action together. Reflection questions. What opportunity did Daniel's manager give him? How did Clara help him face his fear? What strategy did Daniel use to guide his team? Try retelling the moment when Daniel broke the huge project into small steps, in your own words. Part 8. The Victory Within. The deadline arrived with the rising sun, bold and unavoidable. Daniel and his team stood in the conference room. their work displayed across glowing screens and thick binders. The executives filled the seats, their faces unreadable. Daniel's heart pounded, but his voice was steady as he began to present. Every slide, every sentence carried the weight of months of struggle. His first refusals, his 5-minute victories, the nights he fought temptation, the mornings he chose discipline over delay. The Daniel who once drowned in comparison was now standing tall, sharing his vision with clarity and strength. When the final word left his mouth, silence filled the room. Then his manager nodded slowly. Impressive, well-structured, delivered on time. This is the discipline we expect from a leader. Applause followed. It was polite, professional. But inside Daniel's chest, it thundered like a storm of joy. After the meeting, Clara hugged him tightly. "You did it," she whispered. Daniel smiled and shook his head gently. "No, we did it. And not just this project. I've done something greater. I've learned to master myself." That evening, Daniel returned to his apartment. The city glowed outside his window, but the true light was within him. The floor was clean, the fridge stocked, the desk organized. Yet the real transformation was not in the room. It was in his reflection. He stood before the same mirror where he once whispered, "Why am I not enough?" Now, the man staring back at him was not perfect, but he was awake, steady, alive. He remembered his grandfather's words, "Plant your seed, water it, trust your season." And he realized the truth. Comparison had stolen his joy because he was trying to live another man's season. His seed had always been his own. His growth had always been waiting for him. He whispered into quiet, "I am no longer my own enemy. I am my own strength." And with that, Daniel knew he had won the greatest battle of all. The victory was not outside, not in promotions, not in applause, not in possessions. The victory was within, learning focus. Notice the metaphor of the mirror. At the beginning, it showed a broken man. At the end, it reflects a man transformed. The idiom, thunder like a storm of joy, shows how applause felt in his heart. The line, "I am my own strength," turns his old weakness into power. Reflection questions. How did Daniel finally prove that he had changed? What did the mirror symbolize in the story? What is the lesson? Plant your seed. Trust your season mean for your own life. Try retelling the ending in your own words, focusing on how Daniel spoke to his reflection. Dear learner, thank you for staying with this full 8-part journey. If this story inspired you, please subscribe, like, and share so more people can grow with us. In the comments, answer this simple question. What is one small step you can take today to stop comparing yourself to others?